Salutations, my friends. Hello, how are you doing today? My name is Maria. This is Love, Pray, Paint. And today I am sharing my top 5 acrylic painting tips with you today. This will go in no particular order, and I will have categories and then subcategories within the category. Does that make any sense? So it's tips inside of tips with extra tips sprinkled on those tips. This is getting kind of dirty now, so I better stop saying the word tips. So my first tip is water. I like to have 2 different jars of water, one for cleaning my brushes and then one for thinning out my paint. So the one for cleaning my brushes is obviously for cleaning brushes. What the hell? And my next tip is when your water gets cloudy, the water that you use to clean your brushes or even the water that you use to dip in, make sure you are frequently changing that. I'm a little fussy with this. I think it's so important. I tend to change my water maybe even every like 5 to 10 minutes. That sounds insane probably to most people, but I frequently switch over my water so my painting doesn't turn out muddy. So what happens is if you have a jar, just one, filling with water that you're constantly cleaning your brush off in, and the water gets a bunch of color in it, what happens when a bunch of colors mix together? What color does it make? Well, it makes the color brown. Now, unless you're going with a very muted palette that has a lot of brown in, I wouldn't think that you would want your painting to look muddy. I'm sure you probably want bright, brilliant colors, which is just my favorite thing on the face of the planet, is to look at really beautiful, colorful paintings. It's just part of my style that I've been developing lately, and I'm sure that's probably what you are looking for too. So my biggest tip with that is to change your water frequently. And also another thing is to wipe off your brush on either a rag or a paper towel before you dip it into your water. So before you even clean your brush off, wipe off all the excess paint on a rag or on a paper towel. This will ensure that the water won't cloudy as fast, and it will keep a nice fresh painting that's super bright and brilliant. So that is my first tip. So my second tip is brush care and how to take care of your brushes. This is something that I am working on. I do not take care of my brushes correctly. I know how to, but I'm not so good at the brush care. I've actually lately been really good at it and making sure that I really take care of my brushes because, one, I'm sick of wasting money on buying new brushes because I'm constantly buying new brushes because mine are just so ratchet. If you look at my videos and watch my videos and look at my brushes, you're probably thinking, why is this girl giving me tips on brush care? Because I have done extensive research because I don't want to keep wasting my money. So these tips will ensure longevity in your brush life. Okay, and my first tip with brush care is making sure after you're done with your painting, not just rinsing them off in a jar of water, actually physically washing your brushes after each painting, after each time you're done painting, every single time, is to wash your brushes thoroughly. Now I'm going to kind of run through how I've been doing this lately, or I've actually been doing most of this the entire time, but now I'm just better about doing it every time I paint, which is every day pretty much. So how you're going to do this is never use super hot water and never use super cold water. Either one, to me, is not good. The super hot water can make the paint dry fast and gunk up and get really gooey and get stuck in your little bristles. And super cold water, in fact, can actually do the same thing. Have you ever heard that tip, like, stick your fingers in the freezer to dry your nail polish? Well, that applies to acrylic paint as well. If you're washing your brushes in super cold water, this is not a good idea. It will cause the paint to dry faster and chunk up and get stuck in your bristles. So what I recommend is washing your brushes in room temperature water to ensure that the paint doesn't dry super fast and get stuck in those bristles. And how you're going to wash these and what you're going to wash them with The best thing that I've ever used, I've used like brush cleaners, I've used somebody told me to use hand sanitizer once. I've used so many different things, but the best thing I found is Dawn dish soap. Not a knockoff brand. I mean, you could use that, but it doesn't work as well. Just regular old Dawn dish soap does wonders for getting that paint out of your bristles. It will just slide right out. Not just regular water. I see a lot of people take a jar and just put the water running through the jar and just swish it around, swish the brush around on the bottom of the jar. Well, yeah, that kind of works, but it doesn't get all of the paint from inside. Like, you know, if you use too much paint and you got it stuck deep in those bristles, that is not going to get the paint out of there. It's actually just going to shove it down in there further. That sounds so bad, but it's true. And another thing that I have just discovered, which is so cool, are these makeup brush cleaners. Now that sounds crazy to use a makeup brush cleaner for acrylic paint or oil paint or whatever kind of painting you're doing, but it works like a charm. They sell these at like TJ Maxx and Marshalls. You can get them at like Sephora and stuff like that, but if you go there, they're going to be crazy expensive. If you get them at TJ Maxx and Marshalls, these are about like $3 to $4, and they've got like these ridges on them, and they come in mittens or they have like boards. And what you do is you just take your brush and you run it on these little ridges, and you'll put your Dawn dish soap on your brush or on the cleaner, and you'll just run your brush across this and run it under the water, and you'll be surprised at how quickly all of that paint just comes right out of there. Instead of smushing it at the bottom of a jar, you're allowing it to run out of the brush and out of the bristles. You can actually make these yourself as well. I just bought one because I think it's just as cheap to just buy it. Okay, so I will insert pictures of how you make the little DIY brush cleaner. Maybe if I can find like maybe like a Pinterest thing on how to do it, or a video or something, I'll just put that a link down below. After you're done cleaning your brushes with your Dawn dish soap and your makeup brush mitt cleaner thingy, how are you going to hold the shape of your brushes? Because if you notice, a lot of the times if you don't let your brushes dry down flat, or if you leave them in the jar and the water overnight by accident, they really lose their shape, especially like liner brushes, or over time your brushes, just like from scrubbing them and stuff, they lose their shape. They get little pokey outies. I don't know how to describe that. You know, they get scruffy looking. They get it, you know, weird hairs everywhere, kind of like my hair. Just kidding. So how can you salvage your brushes, pretty much? Well, what you can do is you can get a, I believe there's wax that you can buy to keep the shape of your brushes, but it's probably expensive. I've never even looked for it. What I do is I just either go down to my local Dollar Tree or go to Target or Walmart or wherever you buy your soap and buy a bar of soap. It can be Dial, it can be anything you want. I would look for something without a lot of heavy moisturizers in it. I would just get a regular bar of soap. And so what you're going to do is after you're done cleaning your brushes, you're going to take the bar of soap and you're going to run your brush along the soap. And what this is going to do is ensure that like all the bristles are coated with the wax from the soap, and you're not going to rinse it. This sounds crazy, I know. You're just going to leave the soap on the bristles, and it will help them stand up straight and perky and tall again. And you're just going to leave them dry like that. Lay them flat, dry, like if you were washing your makeup brushes and you lay those flat to dry. Do the same thing. You know, put them on a towel, let them dry. And when you go back and look at them, all of your bristles, we're not in Germany, all of the bristles from your brushes, try to say that 100 times fast, bristle brushes, okay, so all of the bristles on your brushes should be perfectly straight and super beautiful again, just like you bought them in the first place. I have actually, this is crazy, but I tried using like petroleum jelly once, just stuff that's kind of waxy, and nothing really worked except for the soap. And the cool thing is that once they're dry, and if you're worried about getting soap in your painting, it won't ruin the integrity of your painting. But if you are worried about that, I would just give it a good thorough like rinse before you actually start painting. If you're not like dry brushing something. But it should be fine and should work. I'm sure you could probably actually buy that wax that you can, that wax that you buy to actually like make soap. If you've ever seen that, you could probably buy that. I would stay away from like oil-based soaps or stuff with heavy like lotiony soaps, that kind of thing, or moisturizing soaps. Just get original like regular soap. And my third category for tips is about your canvas, your canvases. Now, pre-stretched canvas can be super expensive. Even canvas that you buy that is in those giant rolls, unless you're a professional painter and you're selling like hundreds of paintings, you're not gonna buy a giant roll of canvas. Stretch your own canvas. It's just not really realistic in my mind. Maybe someday I'd invest in that, but for now, I am not about being wasteful like that. To me, it's wasting my money, it's wasting resources. So I am a big believer in upcycling or saving money. I'm sure you can tell that by some of, if you watched my studio tour on like how I repurpose things for organization or even repurpose things for painting. So my first tip with this is to use MDF board. Now, what is that? It's like this cheap, almost like fake wood, but it's made with real wood. It's like just pressed together. I don't really know how it's made, obviously. I would have no idea. That's not the point of this. You can actually go down to your local Home Depot or Menards or Ace Hardware or wherever you buy your wood supplies, if you do, or your hardware. Just, next time you go there and visit, you can actually buy like yards of this. Like you can buy like a whole sheet of this MDF, and you can actually have them cut it to the specific sizes that you want, and they will do it for free of no charge. They won't charge you at all. They'll cut it down to the dimensions that you want and how many pieces that you want. They're super helpful. It's really affordable. This is so much more affordable than buying stretched canvas, and it kind of goes along with the trends of today. If you notice, a lot of the art that you see isn't really on stretched canvas anymore, in my opinion. I see a lot of shiplap. I see a lot of like those little wood pieces. I don't know, they're like little stumps that people paint on. And that's kind of, to me, where a lot of the art that I see is kind of painted onto that type of material or wooden material. And so that is so helpful to people who are just getting started out in painting and trying to not spend every single dime you have on stretch canvas, or trying to learn how to stretch canvas, which it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to stretch your own canvas. It just is. It's a skill you could learn, but I mean, if you could do this, it's a lot more affordable. So another thing that you can do to save money, instead of just buying stretched canvases in bulk online, which you can do. You can get really affordable stretched canvases on like Amazon or eBay. You can buy them in bulk, and they're pretty affordable, but these things are actually way more affordable. Go down to your local Goodwill, and there you will find a sea of old paintings that have found their way there to die. So instead of letting that painting die, what you can do is take some sort of primer or white paint or gesso, cover up, unless you love the painting that you bought, cover it up. I struggle with this one because I feel really bad covering up somebody else's. Sorry, I'm in front of a window and these little squirrels are so cute and they're chasing each other. I just got really distracted. Oh my god, they're adorable. Sorry. I struggled with that, like covering up somebody else's work, but you know, it ended up there in the first place, so it's better that you reuse it than let it go in the garbage, which honestly, that's probably where it's going to end up if you don't reuse it. So just paint over it with white as long as their coats aren't too thick, or gesso it, and paint a new painting on it. This is something that I did for quite a few years. I would just paint over somebody else's painting and there was my canvas. If you're gonna sell this, don't do this. If this is just for your own personal use, you can't do that. I mean, that's just not a good idea. If it was for resale, obviously, but if it's just for you to practice on and or for your own home or maybe a gift for a loved one, don't worry about it. Another thing you can do, which is another thing I do all the time when I'm just kind of practicing or, you know, just messing around, kind of making, or for videos, I either use mixed media paper or I use watercolor paper, preferably watercolor paper, or you can actually buy canvas pads, which are more expensive than the mixed media paper or watercolor paper. So I prefer to use like watercolor paper because it doesn't crumple up as much. Mixed media paper I found warps really bad, and so does loose canvas. To me, it even if you tape it down, if you put too much paint on it, it bunches, and I'm not really a fan of that. So I prefer the watercolor paper because that doesn't do the bunching as much. But just make sure if you are using that to tape it down, which is so important, taping that paper down so it doesn't buckle. And watch the amount of paint you put on it. That's another reason, or water. It will also start to warp if you put too much water on it. And another place you can go to buy either canvases or like MDF board type of things is actually the Dollar Tree. I see them all the time. They have those little signs that will like say, like a little saying on them. They'll say like, "You are my sunshine," or something, you know, lame and generic. What you can do is actually just paint over that with white or gesso and paint your painting on that. I've done that quite a few times as well. You know, repurposing something, well, it only costs $1 and you're getting a fantastic work of art out of it. So that is it for my third category of tips. Okay, my fourth category for my top 5 tips is all about paint. What kind of paint you're using and how you're using it. Now, I love acrylic paint for many reasons. Because it dries fast, because it's pretty user-friendly. If you make mistakes, you can just paint over it. There are a ton of reasons why I love it. Well, I started using heavy-bodied paints, and while a lot of people will recommend these, I find them so frustrating and difficult to work with because of how quickly they dry, how hard they are to blend. You either have to put like a medium, like a mixing medium in there, or you have to use a lot of water, and you run into trouble when you're working with paper, or you know what I mean? They're just kind of difficult for me, and this is just my opinion, to work with. And I've struggled and I've had a lot of frustration and a lot of, especially when you're doing, I've really gotten into portrait art the last year here, and I've been practicing doing portraits. Well, when you're really impatient like me and you don't like to wait for things to dry, or this is how I used to paint, I'd like to work wet into wet. Well, that creates a lot of problems, because what ends up happening is if you're doing something like a portrait, or you want it to be, you know, realistic, or you're doing realism or something of that nature, and you're not doing impressionism, what can happen is it starts to dry. Like the bottom layer will dry, and then you're putting a top layer on that, and it's going to get really gunked up and super chunky. And I have found my saving grace, and I just found it like probably a month ago. I started, or maybe 2 months ago, I started experimenting with this, and it was at the recommendation. I saw a Chuck Black video, and he said he uses golden soft bodied paints. Well, those are really expensive and I can't afford them. I'm just gonna be honest. I mean, maybe someday if Golden wants to send me paints, I'm more than willing to take them. No, I'm just kidding. But I can't necessarily afford the most expensive paint, so I tried to find an alternative to that, and the best and the closest thing I could find to soft-bodied paints is actually just using regular craft paint, like from your local drugstore, from Target or from Walmart. And it's a lot more affordable than heavy body paints. Even if you're buying Liquitex like basic, or you're buying any other type of like lower like student grade paint, your craft paint is going to be, even if it's a nicer brand, it's going to be less expensive than heavy bodied paints. I'm not really sure why that is. Maybe it has less pigment, but the reason I like this is because of how easy it is to blend things. Especially when I'm doing a portrait, I find it much easier to use these craft paints or soft bodied paints because it's easier to layer them. It's easier to blend them. And in essence, what you're doing is you're kind of glazing. I mean, in a way, that's kind of what you're doing. But I prefer that. And even if you're working wet on wet, they blend so much more seamlessly together than if you're trying to use hard body paints or heavy body, hard body, what am I thinking about? Then when you're trying to use heavy body paints, I just prefer this method myself. Kind of getting into more of why I prefer to use craft paint recently than heavy body paints is how you go about painting, or how I've been painting instead of how I used to paint. I used to paint wet into wet, always. I always did that. Sometimes I would take the time to use a blow dryer and blow dry it. I'm not talking about when I do tutorials. I'm talking about when, like, on my own personal time, when I would take, like, let's say I'd take like a 6-hour block and I'd want to paint a painting in that 6-hour block or 4-hour block or however much time I had to paint. I would, you know, just layer on layer on layer with heavy body paints and not wait for it to dry, because I would get impatient. Because let's say, you know, I only have 4 hours, I have kids, I have jobs, I'm trying to start a business. There are a lot of things affecting the amount of time I can work on a painting. So like if I get the time to paint, that's my time to paint. I want it done. Well, learning to be patient with your painting and your paint, that's why I put this in this category, is going to help your painting turn out so much better. So how I use these soft-bodied paints or craft paint is by working in small layers and letting that layer dry, and then putting another layer on top of it and letting it dry. And that's how I get the really great blend, and how my colors have been so much more vibrant. And I just feel like the last few paintings I've done have looked so much better now that I've been doing that. I'm using up the rest of my heavy body paint, so I mix them together quite frequently. It's a mix of heavy body and soft body, but eventually I'd like to phase out all of my heavy body paints and buy just only like craft paint or soft body paint. And then another tip I have for, you know, painting category is gesso and buying gesso. I find it to be very expensive to buy gesso. I find it incredibly expensive. And how I, you know, go about priming something that's not exactly a canvas, like I do a lot of paintings on vinyl records. I'm gonna start painting on plain skateboard decks, which are for sale on my website. I'll have that link below. I don't have any skateboards on there yet, but I'm working on getting my inventory up. So if you're interested in any of my paintings, you can visit my website and buy some. It would really help me out. Anyway, so how I prime these is by either using, this is gonna sound crazy, but just regular white house paint. It's super affordable. It's way more affordable than buying gesso. It's so much more expensive than buying just regular house paint. Another thing you can use is just your titanium white paint to prime your canvas. Just go over it with a couple layers of, you don't have to use, I wouldn't recommend using an expensive brand for this. Just buy, you know, your Liquitex Basics or whatever you prefer to use for your like student grade paint, and just prime it that way. So either use house paint or just your regular acrylic heavy body paint. I actually find it to be a lot easier to prime the canvas with these things. One, because they dry faster, and two, I feel like you have to wait so long. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like you have to wait quite a long time for like the gesso to like dry and cure. I don't know if it's just the certain brand that I've been buying in the past, but I just haven't had good results with it. I much prefer to use either the house paint or use the just regular white acrylic paint to prime my canvases. Oh, and another way you can conserve your paint is by, like, let's say you are painting and you like get hungry and you want to go have a meal and you want to, you know, eat in the middle of, you know, your painting, but you have a whole palette full of paint. I don't know what is with the P's. And you have a whole palette full of paint. Well, you don't want that paint to dry out. You can take your saran wrap and cover it. Yes, that's a great idea, but your saran wrap like kind of sticks to it, and then you end up wasting a lot of paint. So what I actually prefer to do is to take a, like if you're using, I use a lot of the time, I use either paper plates or I'll use just like cardboard as my palette. And what I do is I take like a freezer bag, like a gallon freezer bag, and I put the plate inside of the bag, and then I actually stick it in my refrigerator, not like my freezer or anything because that would dry your paint. Stick it in the refrigerator, and this actually keeps it from drying out super fast because the air can't get to it, and the cool temperature keeps it from drying up too fast. This is actually something I learned from watching videos on house paint, like when people paint their walls for their house paint. One of the tips was to save your brush, and if you're feeling lazy, you don't want to clean it, just stick it in a plastic bag and either stick it in the freezer or in the refrigerator. So I think that's a super good tip, and that saves you a lot of wasted paint, which is never good to do because paint is very, you know, costs a lot of money. It's expensive. My fifth category for my top painting tips is when you're feeling like you don't have time, or you're procrastinating, or you just don't feel inspired to paint. What are things you can do to make you feel inspired to paint? The first thing I kind of want to touch on is not forcing yourself to paint when you just don't feel like it. There are days that I just want to sit on my couch and hang out with my kids and like watch a show or play games with them, or just everything except for painting. I think it's really important to listen to those emotional cues on when you're feeling inspired and when you're just not. Never force it, because if you try to force something when you just don't feel like it, it's going to become a chore and it's going to become very frustrating. I think it's super important to feel joy and happiness and excitement when you're painting, and if you're not in a creative mood, it's just, sometimes it's a better choice to just listen to that voice inside of your head and just not do it. Just maybe take the day and do something else with your time. I always try to listen to my intuition on this, and it usually pays off, or doesn't. If I don't listen to the intuition and I force myself to paint, a lot of the times it feels like work. Nothing's fun when it feels like your job, right? Especially your job. So, you know, it just, when you feel inspired, that's when you should paint. So a lot of us don't have that luxury of just like at the drop of a dime saying, I feel like painting right now, or, you know, you putting it on a schedule. That doesn't really work so well for me. Maybe it does for you, but I just, at the time, I have to feel inspired. Luckily, lately, I've been feeling inspired every single day. Every single day, I'm like, ooh, I get to paint today. Ooh, it's something exciting for me. And now I have some tips on how to make you feel inspired. Let's say you're in a schlumpy mood and you really don't feel like it, but you really want to at the same time. Here are some things that you can do to kind of encourage that encourage. Oh my God, that freaking squirrel is crazy. I should really be taping these guys, they're insane. Here are a couple things that you can do to make yourself feel encouraged to want to paint. Okay, so my first kind of tip is to make sure your stuff is very well organized. I don't mean organized, shove everything in a drawer where you can't see it and it's put away. I mean have all of your supplies out in front of you, make them look pretty in a way that makes you gravitate towards your kind of space or studio or whatever you have, to make you want to, you know, go over there and paint. Like if you watch my studio tour, I'll have that link below. I already mentioned that, but I'll just have it linked so you can kind of see how I have my stuff laid out. I think it's important to have your stuff in front of your face. If you have it shoved away in a drawer, well, you're not going to think about it. Out of sight, out of mind, right? Well, if it's in your sight, it's in your mind. You got to think about putting it up on the wall, putting it out on your desk. Excuse me, have your brushes out in a cup, everything ready to go, easy to grab. That's why when you look at my stuff, you think like, what, you know, she doesn't have any drawers, she doesn't have anything in drawers. It's not really, it doesn't seem to be that organized. You have everything out in bins. Yes, I do, but that is for a reason. Because if I'm the type of person, if I have something shoved away in a drawer, I will forget about it. I won't look at it, like I said, out of sight, out of mind. Well, if my stuff is well organized, but out, not shoved away in a closet or something, I will use it. If it's shoved away, I forget about it. I don't see it, I don't use it, it goes to waste. And this is another thing that makes me feel inspired because I sit and look at this stuff every day. I'm like, I should really use that up. I should really use this. I can see it, it's tangible, it's right in front of my face. So another thing is, let's say like you have a painting and you're not, you know, you've started it, but you're not encouraged to finish it. Well, why aren't you finishing this painting and how can you feel inspired to finish the painting? Like I said, it is important to listen to those verbal cues in your head that say, you know, I'm feeling creative now or I'm not. Yes, that's important, but a lot of thing I've noticed, like from watching people's kind of like studio tours and that sort of thing, is I notice a lot of people storing their paintings either inside of drawers or inside of closets or in a space where they can't physically see it. Sometimes I think it's better to just leave it out, even if it looks messy, or find a way to store it where you can physically see the painting in front of your face. Like I said, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. You need to be reminded that you have to finish that or that you want to finish that painting. So never store your stuff like away where you can't see it if it's not finished, or you know what I mean, if it's waiting to go to a new home. Obviously that's a different thing. But if it's something that you really need to finish and you really want to finish, just put it out. Either put it on your easel or put it, just hang it on the wall. Hang your half-finished painting up on your wall. That way you'll have to look at it every day and be like, I need to finish that, I need to finish that. You know, this is a good way to get you to finish what you've started. If you have to sit there and stare at it, nobody wants to look at a half-finished piece of art, at least I don't. Okay, so another thing I really like to do to feel inspired to paint or make art is by looking at things that I love. Like I will either go on Pinterest or I will go on Pixels or Pixabay, and I will look at different pictures of either like nature or sunsets, or I'm really into like starry night skies right now and painting that sort of thing. I don't always paint straight from an image. Sometimes I kind of smush a bunch of images together and get an idea of what I want to paint. And when I do that, I like to use Pixels or Pixabay because I find that to be really important. That you're not, even if it's a photographer, that you're not copying somebody else's work. I think they put Pixel and Pixabay there for you to copy. They encourage people to copy as long as you give them rights underneath, say inspired by this photographer or whatever. I think that's a nice way to do it. Also, going outside. Just go outside into nature. Take your own pictures, take up your own photography, take pictures of the place that you love. Let's say you love where you live and there's a certain walking trail that you go hiking on every single day. Well, take your camera with you, take pictures of it. I've made many paintings of places that I love to go in my own city, in my own town, my own state. I think that's so important for you to paint what you love, because then you'll love to paint. You'll feel that emotion that you feel when you see it. You know, when you go there every time, you can stare at that beautiful work of art. Or let's say you're a portrait artist, or you just need to feel inspired in some way. Maybe there's somebody that's super inspiring to you. Maybe it was a celebrity or a singer or your mother or your sister. Paint them. Go and Google images of your favorite singer and look at all the old cool pictures of them. I've done this many times as well. I feel very inspired by a lot of, you know, females in history, or even males. I love portrait painting. I'm not the best at it. I'm working at it. I will get better and better the more I practice. But really, just if you're feeling inspired by something at a certain time, go and look at images of that thing and really, like, this sounds weird, but, you know, just kind of integrate that into your daily habits, so then it will be on your mind and you're more likely to want to carry that image over onto a canvas. And so those are my top tips, or my top 5 categories for painting. I know it was a lot for one video. I just felt really inspired by a couple different videos that I saw of, you know, the channels that I love to watch, and they've done videos like this, and it made me feel very inspired to make my own tips video and share some of the stuff that encourages me to paint, that helps make painting easier. And I'm not a professional painter. I did not go to art school. So I've learned by trial and error. Sometimes the more mistakes you make, the more you learn, the more you can share, the better teacher you can be. And I hope to be that person for you. So thanks for, you know, watching this video with me and listening to me and all of my tips. So hopefully you really enjoyed this. I would really appreciate if you subscribed to my channel, and I can share more tips with you, more of my favorite channels, you know, more painting videos. And also please like this video if you learned anything, or even if you didn't, even if you're just sitting here laughing along with me. I know I can be really goofy sometimes. So anyway, enough rambling. Just thank you and have an awesome day, and I will see you on Saturday. Bye.